back on the record. Captain Freeman, my name is David Willis, and I represent Ulysses Bautista. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You and I have never talked about this case, have we?
That is correct.
All right. I want to go over some of the documents that Mr. Ozuna went over with you. Is that all right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I'll refer you to the white binder, which is basically my exhibits, and they're very similar to the ones there. And I'd like to have you take a look at Exhibit 1, please.
Yes, sir.
And do you recognize what I've marked as grievance exhibit number 1?
Yes, sir. That's the incident report.
All right. And would you explain to the hearing examiner what an incident report is?
An incident report is, we use a case number in our system to document for record any reports or incidents that we document.
All right. And is the purpose of an incident report to memorialize what happened on a certain particular date and time?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is the purpose of an incident report to describe a crime, or is it limited, is it limited to a crime, or does it have a far more expansive coverage?
It is an expansive coverage.
What else can it contain?
Any type of incident we document.
All right, and what are the incidents that are required by the McAllen Police Department policy to be documented?
Required by policy, incidents required by policy?
Yes.
I do not have a specific list of that.
All right. Do you actually have a policy that governs the writing of reports?
We do.
All right. And that's found in Section 40, is that right?
I'm not familiar with the section without looking it up.
Okay.
Section 40 of what, counsel?
Well, this is Section 40 of the McAllen Police Department Policy Manual. And let me refer you then to tab 19, which would be Exhibit 19. All right. Now, do you recognize what I've marked as Exhibit 19?
Yes, sir.
And what is Exhibit 19?
It is Section 40 of the McAllen Police Department Rules, Regulation, and Policy Manual.
All right. And is this the policy that governs the creation of reports and the contents that are required to be included therein for members of the McAllen PD?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the policy that is used to evaluate whether or not a report is complete, correct?
Whether it's in compliance with policy.
Okay. And the policy itself, it says in Roman numeral 2 there, that when writing reports, officers and employees of the department should remember that they are creating documents which may be viewed to the general public, right? These are public documents, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. That is correct.
And would you describe the difference between an incident report and an arrest report?
An arrest report is going to document a crime where an arrest has been made.
Okay.
And an incident report could cover a myriad of different situations that are not crimes.
All right. So would you give the hearing examiner some examples of those myriad of situations that are not crimes?
We have one titled Request Officer, which is where an incident just isn't covered by anything specific.
Mm-hmm.
We have missing persons. We have public accidents. We have basically anything that's not a crime that a citizen wants us to document.
Okay. So anything that a citizen wants documented that is not a crime can also be included into an incident report, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so when we go back to exhibit number 1, exhibit number 1 is an incident report for what?
This is for, it's title case number 35187 of 2016, and its title is a traffic stop.
Okay. And the second sheet of exhibit number 1 contains what information?
This is the CAD narrative, the computer-aided dispatch entries.
Okay. And so does this contain the record, or I guess the abbreviations of the dispatch log related to that incident report?
Yes, sir. I do not know if it's complete, but that's what they are.
Okay. And I'll represent to you, this has been produced to me by the city.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to verify its contents, and maybe you can help me out with that.
Yes, sir.
So this would demonstrate that on May the 13th, 2016, at 1:01:18, Officer 689 was at 1600 Austin. That's that first line, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you go through this, it has the date, it has the time, it has the dispatcher's identity in the next column, correct? So that MCPD 11757 on the top line, that's the dispatcher,
Yes.
right? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And after that, it says narrative, so that's just a column identifier, right? Just a description, right?
Yes.
And then it gives you a 3-digit number, which would be the officer's identification number,
Yes, sir. It says radio call sign number.
and then an abbreviation of, I guess, of what's happening. Is that
Correct.
And on that top line, it would be Officer 689 at 1600 block of Austin Avenue. Is that right?
Yes.
And if you look at the first page, you'll see that Officer 689 or Unit 689 is Luis Zuniga. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the second sheet demonstrates that Luis Zuniga was responding to the 1600 block at 1:01 in the morning on May the 13th of 2016.
Correct.
Okay. And I want to refer you 3 lines down. That it's at 1:15:17. What does that mean?
It says narrative 700, red man suit to location. Negative on channel, I'm assuming.
Okay.
Our abbreviations, I don't think, are uniform.
Okay. And so 700 is, Unit 700 is Ulysses Bautista, according to the first page, right?
Correct.
All right. And red man suit to location means what?
They're requesting a supervisor bring red man helmet is what I believe they mean. He
Okay.
may have verbalized suit, but it's a red man helmet. The
Can
helmet
I
that
ask
is-
you to repeat that again, Captain?
It says
does that
red
mean?
man suit. However, we don't have any red man suits. The helmet is part of a red man suit. I believe that's what he's intending to request. That's that helmet I described earlier that they put over the suspect's head when we think he might bang his head around.
And a red man helmet is basically a thick padded helmet that's used to prevent injury or self-inflicted injury on a
That is
suspect.
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
And the negative on channel means what?
I'm not sure on this abbreviation. I don't know what that means exactly, but I assume there may have previously been asked if they needed a channel, and they say negative on channel.
Okay.
The dispatcher's abbreviating what the officer probably said.
Okay. Do you see your unit number anywhere on this narrative?
No,
Okay. Were you on duty at 1 in the morning on May the 13th of 2016?
I was not.
Okay. What was your schedule for May the 13th of 2016? What was the hours of your, I guess, assignment?
I typically come in at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not an hourly employee,
Okay.
and I leave around 4 or 5. It depends on what's going on.
Okay. So about 6 in the morning, and then depending on the workload, 5 or 6 at night.
Yes, sir.
Basically 12 hours, but you're on salary, so there's no overtime.
Correct.
Okay. How about on the 14th, the next day?
I do not recall. I know I was in the day after this. The very next morning, I remember being notified and receiving this information the very next day.
But you know that you weren't there on that evening, is that right?
That is correct.
And you weren't there at 1, 2, or 3, 4 in the morning? Is that
No,
right?
sir.
Okay. And you would have been there on the 14th at your regular,
The following day, I think this happened early in the morning. It's dated the 13th, so that would have been the morning of the 13th, about 5 hours later.
okay, all right. You've been a captain for approximately 2 years, correct?
Correct.
And when you were promoted or assigned, I guess it's an assignment, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you were assigned to the position of captain, you had an opportunity to work the downtown bar area of McAllen, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In fact, you've been there before prior to your assignment as captain, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And what size in blocks is the downtown bar district area of McAllen?
There's bars from Austin all the way to at least Dallas. I think there's even one or two beyond that. It's at least 3 blocks, maybe 4
Okay, 3 blocks and 4 blocks
in
in
length.
total in a square?
No, in length, linear.
Okay, and then how deep?
There are bars on the side streets, on a couple of the streets. I don't know exactly how many.
All right. Is the assignment to the downtown bar district area a particular assignment or a particular shift, like a power shift?
We have a shift called the tactical shift,
Okay,
and one of their duties on a regular basis is they report regularly downtown.
all right. And so a tactical shift is something that's kind of unique. It's not in this normal 3-shift scenario. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Would you describe to the hearing examiner the standard shifts at the McAllen Police Department in May of 2016? The hours.
We have shift 1, which is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Shift 2 is from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Shift 3 is from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
And then we have a tactical shift that usually reports at, their hours vary, but it's usually between 4 to 6 p.m. until 4 in the morning. That would be Wednesday through Saturday.
All right.
I'm sorry, could you go over that again? First shift hours are what?
Shift 1, which is a regular patrol, one of our 3 24-hour covering shifts, would be from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then shift 2 is 6 a.m. to 2 p.m.
6 to 2 and then 2 to 10. Got
Correct,
that.
sir.
And then you,
The tactical patrol is a floating patrol that we use
this
for
is in
numerous,
addition to the 3?
in addition to the 3.
Okay.
We use it for numerous things, but one thing they're regularly used for is to patrol the downtown area on bicycle.
Are the hours as assigned? Is that what he's trying?
Well, the hours for that shift, they normally come in from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So they cover, they reach over different shifts, is that right?
It's an overlapping shift.
It's an overlapping
Yes, sir.
shift. Okay. And you called it a tactical shift, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And what are some of the primary responsibilities of the tactical shift?
One of the primary responsibilities would be to patrol the downtown area on bike or wherever we need extra bike patrol. They assist us with special events, parades, anything where we're going to need additional bicycle patrol.
Okay. And aside from being proficient on a bicycle, there are no other requirements to be assigned to the tactical shift, are there?
No, sir.
All right. There's no particular class that's required to be attended to be assigned to the tactical shift, right?
No, sir.
There's no particular training that's required to be assigned to the tactical shift, right?
No, sir.
Okay. So the training that a basic patrolman gets is sufficient enough to be a member of the tactical shift?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Look at, please, let me finish up here, I'm sorry. You said primarily that the tactical shift is assigned to a 4-day out of the week assignment, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that 4-day out of the week assignment is Wednesday through Sunday?
Saturday.
Wednesday through Saturday?
Yes, sir.
All right. And it's primarily assigned to work the downtown bar district, correct?
After a certain hour, that's where they usually routinely report.
All right. And what is that certain hour where they usually or routinely report?
It depends on activities for the day, how long they have to help out the previous shift, what kind of traffic we have going on, but typically we want them down there 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. in that area.
Okay. That's basically when the bars are, active and going or people are getting out, right?
The crowds are building up. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you say the crowds are building up, are there a high volume number of people in that bar district?
Yes, sir.
All right. Over 1,000 on a given night?
Well, it depends on what's going on and which night it is.
Sure.
There could be over 1,000 people there.
All right. And in your experience as a McAllen police officer and your work in that bar district, Friday nights experience a high volume of people, do they not?
Yes.
Okay. And that's been that way for quite a while, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. How long were you assigned to the bar district area?
The tactical patrol,
Uh-huh.
I was assigned to the tactical patrol for about a little over 8 months, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not certain.
Say again, Captain?
A little over 8 months to my recollection, but I do not have an exact time length.
And the reason why a tactical patrol is assigned to the Bar District area from around 10 to 2 a.m. is to deal with a large number of people, correct?
Well, they're the bicycle unit,
Uh-huh.
the biggest bicycle unit we have.
Mhm.
And for that reason, we need bicycles downtown because there's no vehicular traffic after a certain hour due to people crossing across the street.
Okay. But you actually have to patrol that area
Yes,
because there's
sir.
a large number of people, right?
Correct.
And that large number of people have been, in most instances, been drinking for a while, correct?
That's a good possibility.
Okay. And in fact, when you have a large group of people in one location that have been drinking, you have experienced in that district fights and other actions of violence, correct?
Yes, we have experienced fights in there.
And in fact, it was just recently in the paper, right? There was a shooting down there just the other day, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think the paper mentioned to the effect that downtown Bar District area has had a reputation for that somewhat recently, correct?
Something to that effect in the article, I don't recall.
Well, do you agree with that reputation?
Well, yes, they have been in the paper for having fights downtown and incidents of all sorts.
Okay. The 1600 block of Austin Avenue, which is where that video was taking place, that is right there on an alleyway for the Bar District, correct?
It's on the street of Austin, on
Uh-huh.
one of the offshoots from 17th.
Okay, so you're right there in that Bar District area, correct?
It's a street, it's not an alley.
Okay. And there's a bar near there called Palacios?
I'm not sure what the current name of it is, but there's a bar there, right there at the corner, yes.
Okay, right there on the corner, very close to where that video was
Yes, sir.
showing, correct, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you yourself have actually had to respond to a fight in that location, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was a large melee where there's a number of people that were involved in a fight, and you guys were called to break it up, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you yourself actually had to use force to assist in breaking up that fight, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you yourself actually had to use knee strikes to actually break up part of the elements of that fight, correct?
I don't remember what I did. I don't know which one we're talking about,
Okay.
but I do remember, if it's the one I'm thinking of,
Right.
then, yeah, there's people that, after the bar closed, they had a fight there, and I ended up holding people down, and I kneeled on a person at one point, yes.
Okay. You actually had to knee somebody to get them to comply, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And when you did that, when you need somebody to get them to comply, were you subjected to an internal affairs investigation for that use of force?
I was not.
Please look at tab 2, which is exhibit 2 on that white notebook. What is what I've marked as exhibit 2 for the agreement?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is a detailed McAllen Police Department report of the same incident, 35187, 1600 Austin.
Okay. Now, this is substantially thicker than exhibit 1.
Yes.
Why is that?
It's a detailed report, and it probably also includes the offense report.
All right, this is an offense report, correct?
Yes, sir.
And an offense report is different from an incident report, right?
Yes, sir.
And an offense report is different from an arrest report.
Excuse me, what kind of a reporter?
I think that the testimony, this is an offense report?
Yes, it also has a detailed
Offense.
report.
Offense.
Offense, okay?
Yes, sir. It has a detailed report attached to it, which basically has a lot of the same information that's already in the offense report, but it does contain the offense report. And an offense report is documenting a driving while intoxicated charge.
Okay. And actually, the cover sheet of this offense report alleges 3 separate crimes committed by a particular person, correct? This is on the very first page of Exhibit 2.
It does.
All right? And those 3 crimes are driving while intoxicated, harassment of a public servant, I guess non-correctional facility, and resisting arrest. Is that right?
Yes.
And those are in their order, Texas Penal Code Section 4904, Texas Penal Code 22.11, and Texas Penal Code 3803. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And so this offense report memorializes the events that constitute those various alleged crimes, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so these offense reports are created by the arresting officer, right?
Yes, sir.
And then supplemental reports are attached to this report to kind of give the whole picture of the crime that was alleged to have been committed, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the arresting officer is the person who is in charge for creating the initial offense report.
Yes, sir.
That's the primary officer.
That's correct.
And anybody else who's around the scene drafts and submits a supplemental report.
Yes.
Okay. And is that what you see here? You see an initial report from, well, let me ask you this. The person, Aaron Soto, that was arrested in that video that we went through here, was arrested by Luis Zuniga, correct?
That's correct.
And so he would be the primary officer in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so he would be the one to draft the initial offense report, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so then when when Ulysses Bautista responded later on in the video, he would be a secondary officer,
Yes.
and he would file a supplemental report.
Yes.
All right. And that's what's contained in these documents here, right?
That's correct.
All right. And that document, this offense report, is also governed by Section 40 of the policy manual, which is the report writing policy,
Correct.
And the purpose of the offense report is to describe with detail facts that constitute and describe the elements of each offense, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so these offense reports are then submitted up the chain of command for review prior to them be considered final, correct?
Yes, they're subject to supervisor approval.
Right.
Supervisor approval?
So when an officer drafts, when an arresting officer drafts his offense report and he collects all the other documents that are necessary for it, he submits it up to his supervisor, correct?
That is correct.
And then that supervisor then reviews it and determines whether or not there's some information that's missing or needs to be supplemented, correct?
Correct.
And if there is information that is missing or things need to be supplemented, the supervisor will then send it back down to that initial officer and have that report fixed.
Correct.
And the same is true for the supplemental reports, correct?
That is correct.
The supplemental reports are also submitted by the secondary officer up to the supervisor for review, and then if there's something missing, they're kicked back.
Correct.
All right. Now, I want to refer you now to tab 4. And that'd be grievance exhibit 4. And previously you were talking to Mr. Ozuna about this exhibit, and that was city exhibit 2B, but I'll just stick on 4 here. And you testified that this was an interdepartmental communication submitted by Ulysses Bautista in response to your oral order to submit an IDC, right?
Correct.
All right. And I think we've established that you were not on duty or at the PD at 1 to 4 in the morning on the 13th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And if you look at the second page of that document, you're not found to have reviewed this, correct?
I reviewed this. May not have signed it, but it was part of a packet at the end that had my signature on it.
All right. But at least the copy that we have in the file that's tendered by the city, you're not designated as having reviewed it that night, correct?
I did not sign it. That's
All
correct.
right. And actually, this document was created on the 13th, correct? If you look on the second
Yes.
sheet,
Correct.
it was created on the 13th, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you weren't there till the 14th, right?
That's correct.
And this was reviewed by a supervisor on the 13th, right?
That's correct.
So this document could not have been created pursuant to your oral order on the 14th because this was created the day before, right?
That's correct.
All right. So you didn't give an order to create this particular document,
That's correct.
All right. So in the testimony you gave earlier was mistaken. There are some other documents that were created pursuant to your order.
That's correct.
All right. On the 13th that bled over into the 14th. Do you know who was in Ulysses Bautista's chain of command?
Not with certainty.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Would you look at tab 5?
Yes, sir.
And take a look at that document, just scan it through, and then maybe you can refresh your memory about who was in his chain of command.
Okay.
All right, so who was in his chain of command that night?
Lieutenant Mario Garcia and Sergeant Isaac Tamez.
All right, and who is...
Excuse me, can you give me those names again?
Mario Garcia,
Okay.
that's a lieutenant, and Sergeant Isaac Tamez.
And is that found on the first paragraph of Exhibit 5?
Yes, it is. But to clarify, they were supervisors on duty
Okay,
for shift one, or wait, shift one.
okay, all right. And who is Lieutenant Esmeralda Guerra?
At the time, she was the Crimes Against Persons lieutenant who was working off duty in the DWI detail.
Okay, and so do you know if she was on duty that night?
She was working off duty, so it was not a normal schedule. She came in to work a detail.
Okay, all right. And she's the one who signed off and having reviewed the IDC from Ulysses Bautista, which was in Exhibit number 4, correct?
Correct.
All right. And Lieutenant Esmeralda states in her IDC here that on the 13th, she reviewed the video, correct?
Correct.
And then she then made sure that all of the workman's compensation forms were submitted to the personnel department. You see that line, the last line there?
Yes, sir.
All right. In what situations or settings are worker compensation forms required to be submitted to personnel?
On this particular setting, it's because of the bodily fluids, and we may or may not have had communicable disease.
Okay. So any injury by a department employee is supposed to submit some sort of document to personnel for a possible workman's comp claim, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so in a setting as the one that we had on the 13th of May, when you had a citizen spit on an officer, that it could be that could contain a communicable disease, that could result in a workman's comp claim, correct?
Correct.
And so Lieutenant Guerra was required to ensure that that paperwork was filed, correct?
Correct.
And so she would have to instruct people to memorialize the events that make the possible workman's comp claim for spitting on Luis Zuniga, right?
Correct.
All right. What day did you first review the video footage that we showed here today?
I do not recall when the day I received or reviewed the video.
Okay.
I did not document that.
All right. Do you know if it was the next day, a few days later?
It was not the next day. It was at least a few days later.
Okay, because if we go back to, Exhibit 10, I think you testified earlier that Exhibit 10 is the memo that describes your conclusion of your investigation into a possible use of force, right?
Correct.
And that's on behalf of the Uniform Services Bureau?
Yes, sir.
And that Uniform Services Bureau is the department within the police department that takes in complaints made by outside people against the officers, right?
Well, the Uniform Services Division is just, we take in the complaints from officers that within the Uniform Services Division come through me. So if they were from another division, then they will be handled by another division director.
Okay. But you handle complaints from members of the public regarding uniformed officers?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so this memo is the memo which describes your investigation, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in here, you don't say when it is you view that video, does it?
No, sir.
All right. And so your testimony is it was a couple days later?
I do not recall how many days later it was.
Okay.
I know I was waiting on the video. I have to request it from another department.
What department would you have to request it from?
That would be from our IT department.
Okay. If you look at tab 29 of that binder, you'll find a blank calendar. And I'll represent to you that that was a calendar that I pulled off a website called timeanddate.com. It's just a blank calendar for May of 2016, okay?
Okay.
And here it shows that the 13th of May was Friday. It's Friday the 13th, right?
Yes.
All right. So that's the night of the event, correct?
Well, the date of the event was
Yeah, the date of the
early
event.
morning, early Friday morning.
Okay. Yeah, that's that. It's kind of tough to describe, right? So 1 in the morning, is that on the 13th or is that on the 14th? The reports show that it happened on, I guess, the Friday night, but goes into Saturday. Is that right?
It's Friday night has ended. Thursday night has ended, and we're going into Friday morning is when it occurred.
Okay. Okay. So this, all right. So this is late, yeah, Thursday into Friday.
Correct.
12 into 13.
Yes.
All right. And because it happens at 1 in the morning, it's memorialized as
13.
13. Okay. So if that's when the date that it happened, 12 or 13, well, let me ask you this. Were you on duty on the 12th?
I don't
that night?
recall. No, I wasn't on duty anytime. I was not on duty anytime during the time of the event.
Okay. So it happened, between the 12th and the 13th. Does this calendar help you recollect about when you probably would have seen that video for the first time?
I do not recall. I don't recall if it was a day or a week. I don't remember how long it was before I got the video. It wasn't the only thing I was doing,
Right.
so I just don't recall.
Okay. We do know that you finished your report by the end of the month, though.
Correct.
All right. And we also do know that Aaron Soto came in on that Monday the 16th, correct?
I'm not familiar with certain of the date, but I knew he came in.
Okay. All right.
But to answer your question and narrow down the date, it would be in between the date it happened and the date that I asked for the second IDC from Bautista.
Okay. Well, all right. So does your memo say when it is you asked for that second IDC? It doesn't, does it?
Not that I recall, but
Okay. Do me a favor and look at exhibit number 9. It's one tab back. And do you recognize what I've marked as exhibit number 9?
yes,
And what is that?
that's an IDC from Bautista.
All right. And is this an IDC that was responsive to your oral order to describe? I'm sorry. Was this an IDC that was responsive to your oral order for Ulysses Bautista to describe what it is that he did and why he did it?
Correct.
All right. And on the very first paragraph, on the first page of exhibit number 9, it says that I was ordered to submit this report by Captain Freeman, and it starts out on May the 24th, 2016.
Yes,
Does that comport with your recollection of when you gave that oral order?
yes, that's entirely possible.
Okay. Does that line up with the dates that we've gone through here in your testimony here about the date of the incident, the day you concluded your report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you gave your oral order to Ulysses Bautista on May the 24th, 2016, right?
Correct.
And this exhibit number 9 is Ulysses Bautista's response to your oral order, correct?
Yes,
All right. And in his response, on the second page, he says that he jabbed Aaron Soto with his foot, correct?
correct,
And he also describes the fact that he was wearing running shoes when he did that, correct?
correct,
And he also described the fact that he did not put very much force behind the use of his foot, right?
correct,
And he also said where he struck him, correct?
correct,
He says he struck him in the exterior oblique area, correct?
correct,
And he also described the reason why he did it, right?
correct.
And that was to stop him from being combative, correct?
That is correct.
And then he also describes that the suspect, or Aaron Soto, did comply with verbal instructions after that strike, correct?
Correct.
Which is very much similar to what you did at that bar Palacios when you used the knee strike, correct? To stop the circumstance.
Only in as far as to stop the circumstance.
Right. When you first reviewed the footage, that footage corroborated Luis Zuniga's version of events, correct?
Correct.
All right. And that footage showed that Aaron Soto spat in Luis Zuniga's face, right?
Correct.
And after being spat on, Luis Zuniga forced Aaron Soto to the ground, right?
Correct.
And when you saw Luis Zuniga force Aaron Soto to the ground, you saw a possible use of force policy violation, didn't you?
Yes.
Right. Not saying that you determined there was one, but at least there was a possibility of one, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so, in response to you seeing that possible policy violation, you requested Luis Zuniga to generate an additional memo explaining his decision to remove Soto from the unit, right?
Yes.
You requested that of him, right?
Yes.
You didn't order him to do that, did you?
Well, I directed him to give me a memo.
Was it a request or was it an order?
He had to comply.
All right. And if he failed to comply, what?
He'd be subject to disciplinary action.
And a failure to comply is considered insubordination, right?
I wouldn't make that determination.
Well, pursuant to policy, when a subordinate fails to comply with your clear and lawful order, that is insubordination, is it not?
Well, it was something I would document and forward up for that decision.
All right. You would document at least a possible claim of insubordination?
Absolutely.
All right. And in your experience as a McAllen Police Department, a long-time member of the McAllen Police Department, insubordination is one of those kinds of claims that cannot be tolerated, correct?
Yes.
Because it completely disrupts the functioning of a department, right?
Yes.
All right. And so when Luis Zuniga submitted a memo in response to your request, it was actually an order, right?
And as you're describing it, yes.
Yeah. And he actually had to do this under threat of a possible claim of insubordination, right?
Yes.
You didn't tell him when he submitted that memo that he was facing a possible claim of insubordination or discipline for his failure to comply, right? You didn't actually have to tell him that, right?
No.
Right. That's known, correct?
Correct.
All right. And after you reviewed Luis Zuniga's memo, you concluded that Zuniga used the amount of force necessary to restrain Mr. Soto in order to apply the spit shield and the seatbelt, right?
Correct.
That was your conclusion, correct?
Yes, it was.
All right. Also, when you reviewed the backseat footage of Luis Zuniga's arrest of Aaron Soto, you saw Ulysses Bautista strike Aaron Soto with his left leg, correct?
I'm not certain of which leg it was, but yes, he struck him in his leg.
Okay. I'm going to refer you to Exhibit 10, which is your memo, and I'll refer you to the second paragraph and see if that refreshes your recollection on which leg. You can go about two.
Yeah, I got it. Left leg.
All right. So, again, when you reviewed the backseat footage of Luis Zuniga's arrest of Aaron Soto, you saw Ulysses Bautista strike Aaron Soto with his left leg, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you also saw Ulysses Bautista strike Aaron Soto with his left leg on Mr. Soto's left midsection, correct?
Correct.
All right. That's actually in your report also, right?
That is correct.
And when you saw on that video footage that Ulysses Bautista struck Aaron Soto in the midsection, you believe that Bautista may have committed a policy violation, correct?
Correct.
And after you saw Ulysses Bautista strike Aaron Soto, you believe that Ulysses Bautista may have committed a criminal law violation, correct? He may have assaulted Aaron Soto?
You're saying I wrote that in here?
No, I'm asking you. When you viewed that when you reviewed that footage, first, you believe you saw a possible policy violation, right?
Correct.
And when you reviewed that footage, you believe you also could have seen a possible criminal violation by Ulysses Bautista.
At this point, I was investigating the possible use of force violation of
All
our
right.
policy.
So when you saw that video, either at the time or just right now,
Uh-huh.
you didn't see a possible assault, right? Or did you?
I wouldn't have documented an assault based on what I saw, no.
No, I'm asking your opinion. At the time you reviewed it, did you believe you saw an assault?
Can we
No.
clarify who the victim?
Sure. Did you when you saw that video for the first time, and you saw Ulysses Bautista jab Aaron Soto in the midsection, at that time, did you believe that Ulysses Bautista assaulted Aaron Soto?
No, I believe it was a excessive use of force, possibly.
Okay. But you didn't think it was an assault, a crime.
No.
All right. And so, in light of what you saw Ulysses Bautista do in that footage, you requested Ulysses Bautista to submit an additional memo explaining his actions, right?
That is correct.
And when you requested Ulysses Bautista to submit that memo, you didn't tell him that his failure to respond could subject him to discipline, did you?
Not that I recall.
All right. And Ulysses Bautista did, in fact, submit a memo in response to your request, did he not?
Correct.
And that contained all the things that we just discussed moments ago, about the jab, the shoes, the reasons why, and the force he used, right?
Yes, sir.
Patrol officers of the McAllen Police Department in May of 2016 are issued the following equipment. A sidearm, right?
Yes.
A baton?
Yes.
And what is the technical term for baton?
The one we use is a PR-24.
Okay. Are they issued a taser?
They are not.
Are they issued pepper spray?
They are not.
So the only tangible equipment officers are issued, patrol officers are issued, are a sidearm and a baton, correct? For use of force purposes.
Correct.
Yeah. And a sidearm is a tool of deadly force, correct?
Correct.
But a baton is non-deadly force, right?
Well, less than lethal force.
Less than lethal force. All right. So, on May the 13th of 2016, the only tools Ulysses Bautista had available to him for use of force purposes were either his sidearm or the baton, right?
Correct.
You, in your memo, which is Exhibit 10, say that you believe that Ulysses Bautista committed or may have violated McAllen Police Department rules, regulations, and the policy manual, right?
Correct.
Are you talking about use of force policies?
Yes.
Are you talking about anything else?
In policy, no.
So the only thing you're referring to in Exhibit 10 is the use of force policy, right?
Well, there are numerous other things that could be connected. His conduct.
Did you list those in?
I did not. That's why I said he may be in violation of the McAllen Police Department rules, regulation, and policy manual.
And your whole memo here was discussing the strike, correct?
It was investigating the use of force in general.
Okay. So is it, the purpose of your memo was the investigation of the use of force, right?
Correct.
And we've established that there were two physical tools available to Ulysses Bautista on that night, and that was the sidearm and the baton, right?
Correct.
Are you saying that Ulysses Bautista should have used the baton on Aaron Soto that night?
I did not say that.
I asked you twice now about an incident at Palacios and you breaking up a fight and you testifying that you issued knee strikes to people to stop the fight.
Well, you said that several times. I said I remember I did get down on a knee and knee somebody to keep him from, put my knee on him to keep him from getting up. I do remember that, if this is the same situation that
Sure,
you're talking
but
about.
in the past, you've had to use that kind of force, right?
Yes,
Okay. When you had to use that kind of force, did you do it out of malice?
out of what?
Out of malice, anger.
Malice?
Uh-huh.
No.
Did you do it for the purposes of getting the suspect or the person you were restraining to comply?
Yes,
Did you use that knee technique for the purpose of getting the situation to calm down?
I did.
Is calming down a situation what some officers call de-escalation?
Yes,
And if officers use techniques to de-escalate a situation, that's because a situation could be escalating. Things are getting worse, right?
correct.
And an escalating situation involves sometimes the suspect escalating the situation himself, correct? He's getting angry, he's spitting, he's cussing, he's pushing people around, right?
Yes,
And then sometimes the escalation has to do with the people around the suspect and the officer, correct?
yes, people around the subject and the officer could escalate a situation.
And so sometimes when an officer is either detaining or apprehending a suspect, the people around that environment could be escalating the situation, correct?
Yes,
And sometimes when the people around that environment that are escalating the situation, they could be doing it with verbal threats, correct? Claiming excessive force or I've got, something on video, right?
I don't know how that would be escalating it, but yeah, they can make verbal comments to escalate something.
All right, so sometimes verbal comments can escalate the situation, but you also have seen and witnessed circumstances where the people around a situation are actually getting involved
Correct.
physically,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
All right? They actually come in and perhaps pull on an officer's shirt trying to get him off a suspect, correct?
yes,
And sometimes they even get into the fight beyond
Yes.
just pulling, is that right?
yes,
And when you have that kind of situation, when you have an escalating situation, the officer that is involved with the apprehension or the detention is in danger, is he not?
it could be.
And so that's the reason why you have officers respond to certain escalating situations in groups, correct?
Correct.
And in the McAllen and the McAllen Downtown Bar District has a reputation for situations that can escalate based on the number of people and the type of intoxication those people usually employ, right?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'll pass the witness.
I just have a few questions, Captain. Just want to clarify something. When are you normally on duty?
From 6 a.m. until about 4 p.m. and Monday through Friday.
Okay, Monday through Friday. All right. So if this incident happened at 1:30 or so a.m. on Friday the 13th, would that have been before or after you came on duty on Friday?
Before.
Before. Okay, that would have been in the early morning, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if counsel described this incident as bleeding into the 14th, that's not accurate, is it?
No.
This, if Officer Bautista came on duty and was on duty at 1 a.m. on Friday the 13th, what day, what calendar day would he have come on duty?
The 12th.
The 12th. All right. So Thursday.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So his shift started on Thursday and ended on Friday.
Correct.
And this incident happened somewhere in the middle of that beginning and ending period.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So, were you then on duty starting Friday morning after the incident took place?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Is that when you began your review of this incident?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I asked you when you first testified if you had asked Officer Bautista for some kind of additional information after learning about his involvement in an injury incident the night before, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and he provided something to you, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I asked you if that document was reflected on tab 2B.
So B is in Bravo.
B as in Bravo.
Correct.
Okay. Now, this document was provided, well, it's dated 5/13, and it was indicated as having been received by a couple of other McAllen police officers, a lieutenant and a sergeant. I can't quite read their names. Also on the 13th. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So are these documents being generated and received at a time when you're on duty?
It would have been around the time I was on duty or shortly before I got there for the actual documents.
Okay. Now, is this the document that Officer Bautista generated as a result of you relaying the need for additional information through his chain of command?
Now that it's been brought to my attention, I don't remember whether this document was given to me that morning or I asked for it before, if my instructions caused him to write it or someone had already asked for it. But yes, I did ask about his IDC and I received it that morning.
Okay.
Counsel, tell me where you,
I'm on tab 2B, and the only dates I'm referencing in this document are at the very beginning under the little heading section there. 2B, next number tab. I'm sorry, I've got 1B and 1AB. There you go. 2B, and I was referencing the date at the top of the instrument there, and then on the second page in the little date received box. Okay, so.
and you were asking the captain, what was the
Yes.
causation for Officer Bautista to write this document?
Providing, that's right. Now let me clarify again. Did you have?
Can we ask that question again?
Yes. Is this the document that was generated in response to your needing additional information once you began your review?
And if it's in response to my request
Yes.
or whether they had already generated it, now I don't recall.
Okay.
But I know I asked for it that morning.
Mhm.
I just don't know whether they had already completed it or they did it after I asked for it.
Okay. Now, I asked you whether or not that order was in writing or whether it was verbally conveyed, and you indicated it was through the chain of command.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have a face-to-face with Bautista in order to generate this document?
I did not.
Okay. Did you have a face-to-face with Bautista in order to generate a different document?
I did.
Okay. And is that the one that you asked for after the video?
Correct.
Okay. And by the way, when you ask, and that's document 2D. D is in David. Is this what he gave you in response to your face-to-face verbal order to him?
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, did he have the benefit of being able to review the video before providing you with this statement?
Yeah, I showed him the video and asked him to respond to that specific sequence of events.
Okay. You didn't ask him to come up with any additional information without him having the benefit of looking at the video, right?
No.
He wasn't ambushed and asked about a video he hadn't been able to review, right?
No, I showed him the video when I made the request.
Okay.
You showed him the entire video?
No, I showed him the video which had the elements which were not yet reported in any of the documents, which include the kicking of Mr. Soto. And I asked him he needs to elaborate on that, explain what happened, because it wasn't in the report.
I'm still not clear. Did he see the video, or did you just?
No,
give
no,
him a
he,
disc?
he watched it in my office. I didn't give the video to
The
him.
entire video?
No, the incident that was not covered in any of the
I
documents,
see.
I showed him that a minute or so, or
So you were trying to
45
get down
seconds.
to specifics?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Another clarification, Captain. Are you reviewing this incident as a result of a complaint that Mr. Soto made, or may have walked in and made to the department?
He made a complaint after the investigation was already, had begun because of the use of force issue.
But did his complaint trigger your review?
It did not.
Okay. Your review happens before.
Right.
What triggers your review?
The fact that force was used and someone was injured.
Okay. Let me ask you to turn to tab two. you may already be there. 2D, the second page.
2D.
Now, Mr. Willis asked you about Mr. Bautista offering the explanation in this document as to why he felt the need to apply some manner of force. And in the document, it's on the second line on the second page. He says that I then attempted to help Officer Zuniga control Mr. Soto from being combative. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you looked at the video, did you see anything to indicate that Mr. Soto was? Let me rephrase that. Did you see or hear anything to indicate that Mr. Soto was being combative?
Once he was on the floor, I heard Officer Zuniga speaking to him, and I couldn't make out what Soto was mumbling.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me divide that up into seeing and hearing. Prior to the point where Officer Zuniga pulls him out of the car, we see on the video that Officer Zuniga is placing him in the car, and he's messing around with the seat belt. It looks like he opens up the seat belt, clicks it into a receptacle of some kind in front of the area where the detainee sits, and looks like that's a feature that you don't see on a civilian car. And so he's sliding him into the car, right? Did you see anything to indicate that Mr. Soto was being combative at that point? Any physically combative at that point?
No.
Okay. Did you hear anything to indicate that he might be verbally combative?
He made some comments, but nothing that I
Okay.
seemed threatening.
Okay. Well, I mean, did they sound? Could you make out enough of the video to determine whether they sounded threatening or insulting or in any way indicating some kind of noncompliance?
I did not.
Okay. All right. If and Mr. Bautista doesn't say in Exhibit 2D, doesn't make the distinction between physical versus verbal combativeness. But if Mr. Bautista is referring to him being verbally combative or insulting, would that justify the application of a kick or a foot strike to stop him from doing that?
No.
Okay. What are the physical tools available to stop a detainee from insulting an officer?
From insulting an officer?
From insulting an officer, from verbally insulting an officer.
I don't believe we have any physical tools to stop him from insulting someone.
Can you
I don't
repeat?
believe we have any tools to stop him from physically insulting or speaking. If that's
Okay. Is there a need to apply any physical force at all to stop a detainee from verbally insulting a police officer?
no, sir.
Okay. Now, if Officer Bautista meant that that Mr. Soto was being physically combative with either him or Officer Zuniga, did you see that in the video?
I did not.
With regard to Mr. Willis's questioning concerning the possible escalation of the crowds, of the downtown crowds, let me first ask: Did you observe any crowds on the video?
I did not in the video.
Okay, I saw two civilians walking by. Did you see any more than I did?
The next persons I saw walking by or coming by were the two officers on bicycle.
Does the video reflect any crowds gathering and interested in the arrest of Mr. Soto?
The video does not.
Okay. Did Officer Bautista describe in any report or any statement to you any crowds gathering?
No.
Did he ever explain that one of the objectives of any supposed de-escalation was to cause crowds not to become involved in this incident?
No.
And finally, Captain, and I don't want to belabor this point, counsel made references to an incident that you may have been involved in while you were on patrol, where there was a fight downtown, near this area. Do you recall that?
I recall an incident,
Yeah,
if it's the
okay.
same one we're talking about.
And we don't have the benefit of the video of that incident, right?
That is correct.
Okay, but to the best of your recollection, is there any similarity between the incident where you're having to detain people who are engaged in a mass melee to this incident here?
I don't believe so, because the guy in question, my suspect, was not handcuffed, and he was not under control at all. He had free use of his arms and legs, and no one was restraining him.
Okay. Was Mr. Soto involved in any kind of mass melee with anyone else?
No, sir.
Could you repeat your answer, Captain?
About
Your perpetrator was not handcuffed and what?
he was not handcuffed. He had free use of his arms and legs. No one was restraining him, holding him down. He could still get up. He could still turn around and fight. So I was trying to get him handcuffed as opposed to someone already being handcuffed and restrained. And he had come at us swinging, by the way. So
He had come at you swinging?
I had to move, and he fell to the ground. So in order to keep him from getting back up, I was kneeling on him.
Okay. Again, does that bear any similarity to the incident that Officer Zuniga and Bautista are involved in?
Other than somebody had a lower leg extremity contact him, no.
Thank you, Captain. I'll pass the witness.
The difference between your use of the knee and Ulysses Bautista's use of the foot, well, let me ask you this difference, was the fact that you believe that in your circumstance, that suspect still posed a danger to you, correct?
Correct.
And you believe that your circumstance was different because he actually had the ability to inflict some sort of injury on you, flailing his arms and legs. Is that right?
Correct, and there was multiple suspects being detained by multiple people at the time.
But it was your apprehension and fear of danger that allowed you to use the force you used, right?
Correct.
Okay. And this is going to get nitpicky, but I want to make sure we have this correct. The memorandum, which is Exhibit 4 in the binder, this is the Ulysses Bautista IDC. This was created on May the 13th of 2016, correct?
Correct.
And the officer here is listed as Ulysses Bautista on the second page as creating this document on May the 13th, 2016, correct?
Correct.
And his supervisor, and this is Lieutenant E. Guerra, reviewed it on that same day, correct?
Correct.
And on that day, Ulysses Bautista's shift ended at 4 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
And then you didn't come into work until after 4 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
So this document was created before you came into work, right?
I don't know what time it was created, but like I said, I asked the supervisor for it, and when she brought all the documents, this was one of them. Whether he created it before he left or he was still there working on it, I don't know.
All right. So you can't say with a certainty whether or not it was created before or after you left.
Before or after I asked for it.
And then, even if it was created after you arrived, you didn't actually tell him the contents of your order, correct?
No, in either case, it would have been a request through supervisors that I need these.
And then what was the request that you conveyed? What was the actual request that you conveyed to the supervisor?
I'm gonna need IDCs from everybody involved in this, explaining what happened.
All right. You need an IDC from everybody involved explaining what happened, right?
Correct.
All right. Going back to exhibit number 9, exhibit number 9, and this is the IDC from Ulysses Bautista dated May the 24th, 2016. If I understood you correctly, on the second page, on the first line, the part that you disagree with is Ulysses Bautista's statement that Mr. Soto continued to resist and squirm while around while Officer Zuniga attempted to maintain control, correct? That's the part you disagree with.
Well, the video says one thing and this says another thing.
All right.
What I'm disagreeing with is what I saw in the video.
Okay. So, let me ask you this. You disagree with his allegation there because of what you saw in the video, right?
Correct.
All right. And that disagreement, is it also based on what you heard in the video?
Not really, that's what I saw.
Okay, so it's basically just, your disagreement with that statement is based on what you saw in the video, correct?
Correct.
And that's it, right?
Well, the totality of everything the statements that I had,
Well, you had his statement that says that he was squirming and Ulysses and Luis Zuniga was struggling for control, right?
my problem was, like I said, with the fact that he's handcuffed, he's being restrained. Is he moving? Yes. Should he have been kicked? In my opinion, no.
Okay, so you at least agreed that he was moving while he was handcuffed with Luis Zuniga on top of him, right?
Yes.
All right. And so that movement of whether or not that is resistance is just your opinion based on the footage you see in the video that you watched.
Correct.
Isn't it true that immediately after Ulysses Bautista jabbed Aaron Soto in the midsection, Luis Zuniga stated he was resisting? And didn't you just hear that when that happened?
I couldn't make out exactly what he said. Well, he said stop resisting or he's resisting. I could not.
You get to the video. I just want to see if this refreshes your recollection. And go to 1:12:47, and just go about 1:12, like go to 40 even. You got it.
Everyone, you gonna calm down? You gonna calm down?
It would be I'm sorry, go to 1:11.
Can you put him back in the car?
1:11.
Put him back in
even.
the car and then take it from there.
Yeah, 1:11 even.
He's already out at that point, right?
There you go.
You turn into a man once your ankle break. You know it? What's your mom? What's your mom? Exactly. That's what makes it worse. Just what's your charge for that? Sorry about that, I'm drunk. That hurt. Dude, there's nothing on me,
Right there.
Okay.
Did you hear what he said?
I think I heard resisting. Can you play it again?
Sure.
Back up and cover it again, please.
Sorry about that, I'm drunk. That hurt. Dude, there's nothing on me,
I think I heard resisting.
Okay. So at least, at least at 1:12:47, Ulysses Bautista, I'm sorry, Luis Zuniga says something to the effect of resisting, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
I have no further questions for Captain Freeman.
What's your pleasure? I would say, let's break for lunch right now. How's that sound?
Yes,
And since it appears that you're going to want the second day, right?
I think my witness, we can take this off the record.
Yeah, okay.
My witness gets in at 3:30, so he won't be here till 4.
Look, I'll do this anyway, gentlemen.
I was
Me to
just
do it.
I was just wondering if sometimes it's worked out that working through lunch enables us to avoid the second day, but if we're going to go into it anyway, then we might as well take it.
We've already reserved the
Oh,
day.
okay.
So we'll take.
I've reserved it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
Even though it's
We're paying you anyway.
Even though it's Veterans Day. Okay. All right, let's come back at 1:30 maybe, 1:30?
Be fun.
Sure.
You're
You're gonna go. aren't you?
ready
Yeah.
to go, okay?
Okay. Good. Chief, why don't you go ahead and take a seat up there? Okay, the city calls Chief Victor Rodriguez. Okay. All right, Chief, can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Victor Rodriguez. I'm the police chief at the city of McAllen.
Okay. And how long have you been the chief of McAllen Police Department?
I've started my 16th year at McAllen,
Okay.
approximately.
And how long have you, of a law enforcement career in total have you had?
For a long time. I began my career right out of high school, and I served as a police officer in the city of Brownsville, and I served as a chief at the city of Brownsville. I served a total of 16 years at Brownsville. I was chief for about the last 6.5 or so years of those 16 years at the city of Brownsville. And I worked, I was the chairperson of the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles Department for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and I did 6 years before coming back to South Texas and beginning my 15 years that are now complete here at McAllen about 15 years ago.
So you're through the
about
probation
30
period then?
yes, sir. I just got off
Your total,
about
total
38,
time, yeah, 30-something years?
about 38 years, more or less. Yes, sir.
And Chief, just for the purpose of providing the hearing examiner with some context, can you give a brief overview of the McAllen Police Department and its relationship to
Sure.
to the city, the valley, your scope of authority?
Sure. The city of McAllen is not the largest city in South Texas, south of, let's say, Corpus Christi, San Antonio. The city of Brownsville is. But the city of McAllen has the largest police force in this part of the state of Texas. Our total, our authorized strength for the city of McAllen is 289 sworn officers. We've got about 142, 144 non-sworn. So we have a combined total of about 440 employees, more or less, at the city of McAllen Police Department. In total, that is 1 out of every 3 city of McAllen employees work at the city of McAllen Police Department under my department.
Very good. And okay, Chief. Well, let me get right into the issue here. We're here on your disciplinary decision regarding Mr. Bautista, and it was we heard from Captain Freeman that at some point during his review there was a reference of this incident to OPR. Can you explain to the hearing examiner how OPR handles, refers, or initiates potential disciplinary cases involving police officers?
Okay. And I'm going to try to, for clarity purposes, try to lay this out on how reporting happens. There was some discussion today about this memo and that memo and things like that. Just for clarity, the first memo that was written and referenced about 5/13 of 16 by Lieutenant Guerra, that's part of an injury to an officer report, as opposed to an incident involving use of force report. That didn't begin until Captain Freeman began the inquiry. In our department, we're subject to Texas civil service law, local civil service law, and collective bargaining contracts. All of these have a bearing in our process. So the process that we subscribe to is all prescribed for us in these either laws or collective bargaining agreements. When looking at this, Captain Freeman conducted his inquiry. I know it's been titled as an investigation, but it's an inquiry of possible misconduct. And on that inquiry, once their job is simply to do that inquiry and then report the incident to my office. Once I receive that report, then I determine whether or not this internal affairs needs to be involved. And when I did so, then I routed the material for internal affairs investigation.
Okay.
That's the notation you see on the reports. So we have an incident that implicates an offender that may have spat on an officer, which triggers a workman's comp report, which is that first document you see from Guerra trying to now complete the workman's comp report for an officer that may or may not at one time be exposed because of that to some communicable disease. That's a reporting that takes place. That compiling those reports triggered the review of the incident, and the review of the incident discovered not only that one officer, but two officers may have been involved in misconduct, and that's the inquiry that Captain Freeman performed. And then when he completes that, he runs that to our office. In the middle of those two, we have the person subject of this particular arrest that actually walked to the department and said, I want to file a complaint for excessive use of force or something to that extent that occurs. And as is policy with our department, they go to the immediate supervisor, they take their complaint, and then that's the inquiry that follows. Ultimately, my office determines whether or not, based on that reporting and that first analysis, whether or not the matter needs to go to internal affairs for further investigation.
Okay. And Chief, in this particular incident, the May 13th arrest of Mr. Soto, how many officers were implicated in possible misconduct that was going to be looked into by internal affairs investigation?
Two officers.
Okay.
Officer Zuniga and Officer Bautista.
Okay. Now, with regard to either of those officers, and your decision to initiate a disciplinary review of their conduct on that night, are you limited to relying on the fact that Mr. Soto came in to complain, or the fact that Captain Freeman is referring an incident where he's of the opinion that there's been some misconduct committed? What are you triggered off of among those things?
Notice of possible misconduct to us in any form can initiate our processes and our action. So it could be that it could be that a person complains, like in this case it happened, or someone reports internally that something that may constitute misconduct has happened. Either way, either one of those could trigger that first review to my attention, and then my ultimate order to internal affairs for investigation.
Okay. So were these with regard to Zuniga? What were the allegations that you were looking into there, and what ultimately happened with that?
Zuniga is the officer that makes a traffic stop, which happens to the operator in this case happens to, and I don't know if you heard, but somewhere along the line he says, I made a wrong turn, and that's where the officer ended up making. He signals him, and he makes a quick turn and ends up at the location which has been called 1600 Austin. Okay, so that's where he's not in that area. He's somewhere else and ends up being pulled up in there. So he makes this traffic stop there, and as a result of that, makes a determination to arrest him for and charge him for driving under the influence. You see that in the course of that, there's what I call trash talk between, let's say, the officer and the suspect of that DWI. That happens back and forth. It's going on as he's putting them in the car.
Let me stop you right there, Chief. As to that, as to what you just described, that involves Officer Zuniga and the suspect, Mr. Soto, is Officer Bautista involved in any of that at this point?
No, sir. No, he's not a party to this until he inserts himself into the arrest situation and actually strikes the person on the ground.
So back to Zuniga. Go ahead and continue.
So Officer Zuniga makes that arrest, makes a stop, makes a determination he's going to charge, puts him, handcuffs him. All of that is taking place. Places him in the car ready for transport. And in that process, you see that the individual spits out. Whether or not he meant to spit in Officer Zuniga's face, or not, it doesn't matter. It landed on his face, apparently based upon what we know. Officer Zuniga reacted to that and basically pulls him out of the car, and in the process throws him on the ground, and then later calls for what we call the red man suit, which is a mask in that.
And did you do a full OPR, internal affairs investigation of the allegations against Zuniga?
Yes, this incident was submitted for investigation with two parties to it, Officer Zuniga and his role, and Officer Bautista and his role in this.
What was the ultimate resolution of the disciplinary investigation against Officer Zuniga?
Officer Zuniga had multiple responsibilities. Those were made clear to him. He, in my view, also had committed infractions of policy. And in facing those, he opted instead to resign and left the department.
Okay. Were the investigation against Bautista, was that operating parallel to the investigation against Zuniga?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How did you personally become aware of the prospect of either Officer Zuniga or Bautista having committed some misconduct?
Captain Freeman's report to my office.
Now, have you watched the video?
Yes, sir. I have.
Okay. Did you do so as part of your analysis for both Zuniga and Bautista?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Now, with regard to Officer Bautista, is the whole video relevant? Is there a part of the video that's relevant? What is it about the video that informs your decision with regard to Officer Bautista?
Officer Bautista, after I think 8 or 9 minutes, shows up at the location that Officer Zuniga has made this traffic stop at, and Officer Zuniga, Officer Bautista, basically is a backup at that point and serving in that role. If you notice, he's standing by, making sure the officer's going to be fine, which is, what any one of us would do at any one traffic stop location anywhere in the city, just to make sure things are okay. In this case, Officer Bautista, when Officer Zuniga, he effectively just yanks the suspect out of the patrol car and throws him on the ground. Officer Bautista seizes the opportunity at that point in time to kick the individual, and it's not a kick that happens. It's not a use of force that happens in the course of doing our job. We do our job. We do our job every day, and officers make arrests every day. An arrest is a use of force. It's forcing, bringing somebody into custody. So this individual at this point in time is already handcuffed. He's on the ground facing down. He's not kicking or squirming or anything like that on the ground. You can tell that from the video. But he has offended, in the view of both of them, one of the officers. And it's clear to me that that's one reason why Officer Bautista chose to abuse his authority and power at that time and strike this individual while he was on the ground. If you notice on the video, it isn't a kick that happens incidental to handling somebody or seizing somebody or subduing somebody. If you notice, he cocks his foot. He takes a position in a way to be able to deliver that kick with the maximum strength possible. So it's an intended action as opposed to something happening in the course of us doing our job. Number one. Number two, the other thing that's obvious, from that second forward, the individual complains of pain. And ultimately, that morning, 2 hours later, was transported to a local hospital, and thereafter, from that point forward, transported to a San Antonio hospital for care.
Okay, Chief, now we heard through Mr. Willis's opening statement and through his questions for for Captain Freeman, that it appears to be Bautista's position that there was justification for his application of the use of force, either to control the situation that was escalating, to use the council's words, or in viewing Bautista's third account of the incident to prevent combativeness on the part of Soto. In viewing the video, do you have an opinion? Did you make any conclusions as to whether or not Bautista is facing that situation and was justified in terms of the use of force?
The only duty that Officer Bautista had at that moment in time is to help that person that's on the ground and assist the other officer to put him in the car in a careful manner, not abuse and assault him in the manner that he did.
Very good. Now, I asked Captain Freeman whether the fact that Mr. Soto may have been hurling insults or verbal abuse at the officers, whether or not that provided any sufficient provocation or the need for application of forceful control techniques. He answered in the negative. What is your answer to that?
Absolutely. I mean, there is that's. I mean, we face that every day. People could tell us and call us and tell me things about my mom and my grandma and everything else. Those are things. It's just a landscape, part of the work that we do when we take somebody into custody. Putting somebody into custody is not a willful act. It's seizing a person. It's an arrest of a person and taking him to a jail. That person, I don't know if you can tell, in the process, he's, when he realizes what's happening, he says, "I can't afford a DWI arrest." It's a significant act and it's a significant event, and it strikes people differently. So there is no authority to use force where the basis is any kind of verbal statements made by any one individual to the contrary. I mean, I think people would argue we have the freedom of speech.
What is the appropriate response for a police officer when faced with someone who is being verbally combative?
And we face that on a pretty regular basis. Someone will say in the course of an arrest, "I'm going to get you," or "I'll come back later," things like that. And the recourse in those situations, like the recourse was here in the spitting of the face. If someone makes those kinds of remarks, then you charge them with threatening remarks. That's the recourse that we have. In this case, we have what was perceived to be as a spit in the face. It happened, and the recourse could have been an assault charge on the individual as well for that particular act. So if in the course of arresting, and we'll get some more verbal persons than others, and they'll say things like, "You know what, I'm going to get you later," or "I'll come back." That's a retaliation charge. That's the recourse that we have.
Very good. Now, to the extent that Officer Bautista may be offering that Mr. Soto was physically combative to either him or to Officer Zuniga, what is your review of the videotape lead you to believe on that front?
Absolutely non-existent in the evidence that I see in the video, number one. Number two, Officer Bautista is a secondary officer. He's there to assist the situation. So if there was any of that occurring, the primary officer, like he did in this case, I thought he reacted emotionally, and I thought he reacted improperly as well, the first officer. So that would have been the situation with the first officer, but not any evidence of resistance, of assault, of squirming like it was mentioned a little while ago, anything like that that was threatening in any manner, any more against even, first and foremost, Officer Zuniga, which is a primary officer, and much less, if non-existent at all, to Officer Bautista.
Chief, we've heard again, through council's questioning, that it's possible that Officer Bautista is offering that de-escalation was necessary, not necessarily as a result of Mr. Soto's conduct, but that the crowd may have had some effect on his decision-making with regard to applying what he called de-escalation to that situation. What does the video reveal about whether or not the crowd provided any influence on that?
I think there was an attempt here by council to portray this as Wild West on 17th Street on a Friday and Saturday. First and foremost, I think you realize that this was a Thursday night, number one.
Second?
This was a Thursday evening incident as opposed to a Friday evening incident. The other thing is, you got video of the street in the course of looking at this. There are two people, I think, that walked by and they're walking away. By that, I'm not so sure you could tell by those things that they are patrons of anything. They may be just passersby, but that's the extent of what's evident on the video itself.
Okay. Was there any need on the part of either officer to take into account any kind of de-escalation factor as to crowds that may have gathered?
Okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for something.
Let's take a couple of minutes. What's the matter? Something happened?
No, give me a second, sorry.
All right, okay.
No, I think to the contrary, and I'll point to a document that he pointed out a minute ago or earlier today, and it's under tab 1 of his exhibit. And in that tab 1, it's page 2.
Is this of the white notebook or the blue one?
I'm sorry, this is the white notebook. I guess it's Mr. Willis's notebook.
Grievance exhibit notebook?
Yes.
Okay. Tab 1?
Under tab 1, page 2. This is what we call a call slip as opposed to an incident report. This is not an incident report.
A
This
what
is
slip,
a
please?
call slip.
Call slip.
This is the activity that's going on at the dispatch center. This is the activity that a dispatcher is hearing over the radio and documenting on that call. And on page 2, if you look at that, he's making a traffic stop. Apparently, ultimately, the first entry is 1600 Austin. That's where the traffic stop ends up occurring. But immediately after that, and again to the point of whether we had a Wild West situation going on, if you look at the second entry, he says his status is 10-4. In other words, I don't need a backup, I'm fine. And
Let me ask you some particulars about that, Chief, before we get too far into it. Can you walk the hearing examiner through the components of this code, of this sheet? Because there are a lot of numbers here and what appear to be codes, and it's not immediately obvious what they might mean. The first two entries, it looks like there's a date. They start off with a date and then a time.
Right.
The first one being 1:01:18, looks like 1 a.m. 1:01 a.m. And then there's a.
In the third column, I believe that's the dispatcher code. That's a
Okay.
dispatcher, the operator that's handling the call, the entry.
Is that the entry that reads MCPD?
MCPD, that's her number, right?
11757?
Right.
Okay.
And then the narrative is the brief notation. It's an annotation that happens when dispatchers are listening on the radio and they say, you know what, I'm 10-4 means I'm okay, I don't need backup. And so that's what they write, status 10-4.
And what is the significance of the 3-digit number after the word narrative there?
That's the call signal for the person. In this case, 689, for example, I believe that's Officer Zuniga, and 700 is Officer Bautista.
Okay. So who calls in status 10-4?
Officer Zuniga.
Okay. And what is the significance of that status?
When you call in 10-4, it means I don't need a backup. Things are clear.
Okay. All right. What about the very next entry, which is a narrative 700, red man suit to LOC, neg on CH. Mr. Willis had asked Captain Freeman about the significance of that entry. Do you have any information on what that entry means?
Yeah, it's important to note here that it's 13 minutes later we get the first radio call from Officer Bautista, and he's saying, "Get me a red man suit to the location." The location of Officer Zuniga's location. And the next thing he says is negative on channel. Negative on channel means I don't have an emergency. I don't need a channel for, don't clear the channel. That's what that means. When we have a situation that may become urgent or an emergency, we'll say, clear the channel for me. And that means only those people working that incident will stay on that channel or communicate on that channel. When you say negative on the channel, that's communicating the opposite. In other words, there's no emergency here. I don't need the channel cleared for me. That's what that is.
Does that make it available to anyone else who might
Yes,
want
sir.
to use the channel?
Yes, sir. In other words, normal traffic on that channel.
Okay, Chief. Just looking at the videotape and the segment of the videotape where Mr. Soto is pulled out of the car and then is kicked by Officer Bautista. Is there anything about that videotape that you can point to that would justify the kick as a reasonable or necessary application of force consistent with your policy?
I'm sorry to say that that the answer to that is no. There's absolutely no justification for use of force. Here we're focused on Officer Bautista's role in this incident, so I'll answer to this situation. There's absolutely no justification for any use of force on his part in this particular incident, and certainly there is no justification for the kind of use of force that was delivered in this particular incident.
Okay, Chief. Now, what about Officer Bautista's various reports and accounts of the incident? Right. What is problematic about those?
Well, we've talked about a series of reports thus far in this hearing today, and so I'll refer to them as they are entered in your particular binder. And if you look at, I think it's section 2.
Mine starts with 2A, where we see the I asked
right.
Captain Freeman about the supplement that
right.
that Officer Bautista first prepares with regard to this incident.
Right, and that is the 2A is the reporting of the arrest in this particular case. Okay, and the officers that are involved with this particular incident. So with regard to that, I think what's important is to note that there seems to be an attempt to harmonize both Officer Zuniga's report with Officer Bautista's report. If you look at they're in the critical areas, they're almost mirror images of each other's report. And there's a certain word, for example. If you look at under 2A of the blue binder.
And just to help us along with that, Chief, there are some numbers at the top right-hand corner of the page that might help us zone in.
Right. Okay, so I'll see if I can find it. I'm looking at page 9 of 20.
Okay.
I don't think mine has got Bates numbers on top.
No, it's not Bates number.
It's on the top right hand corner. It's the document page number. It's up here.
Gotcha.
And by the way, those aren't mine. Those are PD.
Those are document page numbers, right?
Okay, Chief, we're on page 9 of 20 out of 2A.
If you look at, it is towards the bottom, towards the end of paragraph number 4. And I'm just kind of citing one particular area here. For example,
if you can read it out, we can
okay.
We can find it.
As I pulled Mr. Soto, I felt him lunge his body weight out.
Okay, that looks like that is three, four, 6 lines from the bottom of the big paragraph there in the lower half of the page.
And so that, for example,
One
go ahead.
section,
Go ahead.
just to make sure we're all in the same place. Everybody found it? Okay.
So this idea that this particular person lunged at him is what Officer Zuniga reports. And you find the same language in Officer Bautista's report.
Okay, can you give us a page number for that language?
On page 16 of 20 of that same document, in that same section.
Okay. And on page 16 of 20, where should we be looking?
Let me see if I find it. If you look at about middle of the paragraph down, about the middle of the sentence is when suddenly Mr. Soto lunged at officer.
It looks like it's right at the halfway point in those paragraphs there.
Right.
Were you able to find that?
So the question you were asking me to answer was, what was either right or wrong in missing this report?
Yes.
No, one of the things that struck me right away is the apparent effort to harmonize the reports on immediately following these reports. By the way, what's called the arrest report in this case, the exhibit under 2A, these reports immediately follow the arrest. So it's not like a week later, 2 weeks later. These are before they leave that night. These are submittals that night. That same immediately when they after they leave the jail, they go to report writing, so to speak, and they write these reports. So these follow immediately after the incident.
9 and 20 of 9 and 16.
Yes, sir.
Same day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then the other thing you asked me, what struck me about this report, if you look at then 2B in that same binder, that is a report to Lieutenant Guerra, Esmeralda Guerra.
And let me. Okay, this is a report to Lieutenant Guerra. What role does Lieutenant Guerra have in this?
And again, just to kind of put this in a little bit clearer situation, Officer Zuniga is working what we call an overtime DWI detail on this particular evening, and so is Lieutenant Guerra. So they're both on an overtime traffic detail for DWI. So for that moment in time, Lieutenant Guerra, not normally his supervisor, for that operation, she is his supervisor. That's why Lieutenant Guerra typically would have been at CID, or what we call Criminal Investigations Division. That would be her normal assignment. But this night, she happens to be working overtime detail with Officer Zuniga. So that's why she's involved in this process. But this report to her is part of what we call the reporting for an injury to an officer report, a workman's comp report. So that's what this is right here. But what struck me about this is that there's no reference here about the necessity for use of force. Nothing is reported by Officer Bautista. Okay. And then as we go forward, then you see another report that's part of the packet that ultimately Captain Freeman turns into me, and that is under 2D. And there is now some reference as to for the use for physical force based on a fear. So all of a sudden, that report, which is about 11 days later, now he says, well, I had to use force because I feared this or that. So those were the kind of things that were beginning right away to stick out.
Okay. Well, about Zuniga's and Bautista's characterization of Mr. Soto having lunged at one or both of them, what are you looking at to determine that is not an accurate report?
Well, I mean, I think the video is very, very clear. Had he been lunging at him, they wouldn't have to reach in there to grab him out, and that's exactly what happened out. So contrary to lunging, they actually reached in there. He reached the first officer, reached in there and yanked him out. So that's, again, not only not right, it's a false representation of what actually happened, and appears to be harmonized. I don't know if you noticed, but in the video, when he's down on the ground and after he kicks him, he says he's resisting. That's a message. That's a message to the officer. Write it up as resisting. You know. So again, an indication, which I thought was a plan to harmonize the reports that ultimately ended up in reports that basically looked like the same.
Okay. Now, Chief, was Officer Bautista afforded the opportunity to engage in any kind of loudermill or name-clearing, final due process hearing before you made a disciplinary decision?
Excuse me, explain that to me again, Loudermill?
What is sometimes referred to as a loudermill hearing or name-clearing hearing. Most of the time in civil service, we refer to that as a due process hearing. One last face-to-face with the chief and the officer who's under investigation to explain his actions before the chief makes a disciplinary decision.
It's an opportunity for one last time to be heard, to add information, to explain information, to say why they did or did not deserve any discipline. The answer is yes, sir. I scheduled that for July 15th, and we continued it on to July 20th. So we had one. We started at one and continued it on to a later date.
And let me ask you to turn in the blue notebook to tab 2I.
Yes, sir.
And then can you explain the role of this document to the hearing examiner in terms of that final hearing?
2I is that notice for, for that loudermill hearing.
Okay.
Okay, so it is, it follows this is that step in the process where we begin an inquiry, we give them an order to give a statement, we conduct the investigation. The next step, once we've gotten all the things done, we give him a notice for a hearing. That's when he gets a chance to appear before me and explain, elaborate, say why that person should not be disciplined or otherwise. Whatever they believe should be heard or said or introduced in terms of information before a decision is made on the merits of the complaint in front of us.
Is this part of your normal disciplinary process?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. I noticed in looking at this document, it is a 6-page document, and it appears to have various components that are set apart by bold section headings. Can you walk the hearing examiner through the components of this document and what role those components serve?
On that notice,
On
the
this
same
notice,
document? Okay, and again, this is simply a notice that generalizes, we have this incident, and if determined to be true, they may constitute a violation of rules, regulations, policies, and laws, including the following. And so I include those. For example, if you look at page 1, about the middle of the page, I explicitly state that, and I say, if conduct, if found to be true, may be in violation of rules, including the following. So the idea here is to give that person an opportunity to know what is the issue at hand, what's the complaint at hand generally, and then also what it might rise to if, so that's why this is a notice right here. So this is that notice for that, and if you notice, I begin to list some of them. Cause for removal, which is our Texas Government Code, which is our civil service law, and the subsections of that go on to page 2, which is acts of incompetency, neglect of duty, discourtesy, conduct prejudicial to court order, violation of rules, and then also the body of law that is known as the Civil Service Commission Rules and Regulations, which is by virtue of being a civil service city, we have a Civil Service Commission that also prescribes these rules, and those are typically mirror the state statute as well. And then we go into individual department policies, for example, Section 9, the personal conduct, and Section 13, the conduct on duty, and Section 40, report writing policy, Section 49, arrest and handling of prisoners, and Section 50, use of force.
Okay. Now, at this point, when you serve him with this notice, Chief, have you made a final decision as to what charges you find to be true, what rules you find to be violated, or what discipline he might be facing?
No, sir, I don't arrive at that point until I've had my, what I call this louder hearing. I give the employee the opportunity to one more time explain, add, take information, bring information, whatever. And then after that is when the next responsibility I have is to decide whether the complaint is true or not. And if it's true, then decide what action to take.
Okay. So did Officer Bautista elect to participate in this final hearing?
Yes, sir, he did. And that occurred on, like I said, over a series of 2 days, I believe. And it was, that's outlined on Exhibit 1 of that blue binder. And I begin to lay out these on that information at the bottom of page 4.
Okay. And Chief, just to clarify, I'm going to ask you more specific questions about the item in 1A in just a bit. But,
Okay.
But just so that the hearing examiner knows, can you explain what 1A, what Exhibit 1A is?
1A is a notification of my determination in a particular matter and what action I'm going to take.
Okay.
I have a requirement to notify our civil service director immediately, and I also have a requirement to notify the individual affected in this case, Officer Bautista, to notify him within time constraints that are laid out by civil service law. This is that letter noticing both of what my determination and what conduct I'm going to act upon, and what I believe are the violations of policy, rules, regulations, and laws.
Okay, so this is your final decision?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So now you started to refer to it because you say it makes reference to his participation in the final due process hearing, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And where is that, by the way, on that page?
If you look at the bottom of page 4, I begin to report my activity with that regard. And it says I had originally scheduled a meeting for July 14th, and we rescheduled that to July 15th at Mr. Willis's request. And then on the 15th, we held our meeting and continued that meeting until July 20th. And at that time, he was informed of the allegations and given an opportunity to respond.
Now, was Mr. Willis present for that hearing?
Yes, sir. If you look at page 5, at the third paragraph, I make an entry there that Mr. Willis was present for that due process hearing as well.
So he had the benefit of counsel during that final hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, Chief, during that hearing, did Officer Bautista offer any explanation that